Our next stop actually will be right on the border. We're just going to stop for a couple of minutes, not for photos or anything, but we need to stop because in the Swiss system you need to stop and pay for entering into the country using the roads. It's different from here because even here, as you saw, we are going through these gates, right? Peage, they call it. It's a toll fee that they collect automatically. So normally here we don't even stop. We just go through. We have like a electric box here in the front of the bus, and then it's connected to the account of the bus company, and then it just works like that. But in Switzerland we have to pay an additional fee for entering. We don't have to worry about that now. We just stop there. I will go inside with the driver to the station and then just sign the paper, pay for it, and go. So it's usually very smooth. But yes, so entering into Switzerland is a tricky thing because you would think it's so easy to get inside, right? Because normally they just have someone standing there looking around, some guards checking some stuff, but actually because they're not part of the EU, that means they have different laws regarding entry. But for you guys, you don't have to worry because they're also part of this called the Schengen visa. Okay, so your visa is valid here as well into Switzerland. So normally they do not check any passports. They just only check. Sometimes they do random checks on vehicles, even local cars they check. But the reason why is that they have a very strict policy on a lot of things here inside Switzerland. Okay, so Switzerland wants to keep a lot of their customs and a lot of their traditions intact. So there's many things that they do not let inside their country. For example, they have their own produce for food, right? So they try to maintain kind of stability inside their own economy, so they are not flooded with cheap and bad produce or bad products. Okay, so they're quality products coming from their own farmers. Okay, so it's a very smart way to keep your economy, stable, and also your people happy and healthy. It's not valid for the rest of the European Union actually, because European Union you can you can buy very bad quality food because the thing is, some of the countries like Spain, Portugal, they produce a lot of crops and they sell it for very cheap. So since the European Union opened and more people joined in, those economies who are much smaller, they're being flooded with the produce of bigger countries with bigger agriculture, so that is a problem. But for the Swiss, it's no problem because they do not take part in that union. So they have their own farming system. They have their own produce. Only they import things that they cannot produce. Okay, but as you know, what is a Swiss famous about? Can you tell one?
Watches, cheese,
Chocolates, watches. What else?
money.
Money. They have money.
Money from dictators.
Yeah, like in the Hollywood movies, right? Gangsters come here, put their money. But it's true. It's very true, actually. So it's not just in the movies. Yeah, so those are the main things most people would know about Switzerland. They have the flag, the red and white cross in it, right? That's the flag that you will see everywhere. And yeah, so Swiss made, yes, very important, Swiss made. So it means Swiss means it means it's good quality. It's something that will last, like this watch, So you have the something quality and unique about the approach of the Swiss people. So all these things coming from Switzerland, the chocolate, chocolate, watches, and also the Swiss Army knives, precision, and also they produce different things as well, machinery, like a precision machinery, and also they produce drugs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Roche.
maybe if you, it's the legal drugs, like pharmaceutical drugs. Yeah. But these days there is no big difference between this or that, right? Because it will make you sick and you die anyway. So, but it's good business, as the Swiss, you know it. So actually, I want to talk about a little bit to explain what's going on with the Swiss and why they are so important in the world. Okay, so many things. Production of different goods, yeah, very important, and but also you have something other than that. So you have a very strong economy, very stable, and they have their own currency. That's why they don't want to join the EU, because they know it's going down. And so they want to always keep out of trouble. So they have a history of that throughout the ages. Actually, I'm going to talk a little bit history, just a couple of facts, so you can connect the dots at the end of it, how we got here. So beginning, you had nothing, yeah, and then a big bang, and then light came, and then God said that, you know. No, just joking. The main thing is the Swiss people have a long history, but going back all the way to the time of the Romans. Yeah, so the Romans were here more than 2,000 years ago. Yeah, so they also left something behind: the heritage, the culture, and the basis of the new culture that grew out from the old Roman Empire. So we have to go back to the time of the Romans. The Romans already occupied this area, and they call it Helvetia. Okay, so that was the name of this place. The place, now we call it the Helvetic Confederation. Okay, so if you will look at the money, they have writing on it, Confederatio Helvetica is the name. So it's the Helvetic Confederation, which is the old name for what we call it today, the Swiss country. Okay, so back then it was just people living in the mountains. So this, as you will see, it's a landlocked country. It's surrounded by mountains, inside and outside, all mountains. The mountain range, we call it the Swiss Alps. Okay, the Swiss Alps is one of the most important mountain range, and the largest, tallest mountains of Europe are located here. And so the Swiss Alps also connects to the German area, and also into Austria and Liechtenstein, so all these areas, and also into France and Italy. So it's a huge range of mountains. Okay, so that's what we call the Alpine region, and the Swiss Alps are very famous. So if you look at postcards, you only see mountains and cows, yeah, and that's because that's all there is inside. And so the people actually settled here many centuries ago, living up in the mountains and some areas which is more flat, so they can do a bit of farming. So back in the day, Romans came here, took over, and then the people who lived here, they became part of the Roman Empire until the end of around the 5th century, the fall of the Roman Empire, and then the start of a migration of the Germanic tribes into the regions. Okay, so that is a time of a bit of warring and the making of new different regions. So in today's Switzerland, they have these regions. We call it canton. Okay, canton is one region. So we have the canton of Lucerne or Zurich and so on. So each region has its own regional capital. Okay, so you don't actually have a real capital for Switzerland. Okay, so it has to do with the history. So back in the day, before the formation of this confederation in 13th century, they had just different regions which had kind of smaller trade pacts and unions between these different areas. Okay, so you can imagine it was not like a country. It's like, let's say you have a city here, another city there, and these cities have a kind of agreement between, okay, we don't kill each other, we just send some cheese, send some food here and there. So they started doing that. But because of that, as you spend more time with different groups, you grow to become friends and so on. So this is how it began with the Swiss. And all these regions, they started developing new and more closer relationships. And also these towns grew, cities grew, became more wealthier with the trading, because there was no other road across the Swiss Alps to the north part of Europe. So from Italy or from the Mediterranean, to get the produce across, you had to go through the mountains. So because of that, all these trade routes had to go through the Swiss. Okay, the Swiss. And so this is one of the reasons why they became very important in the history, but also because they started developing into a more unified state around the 9th and 10th century. Okay, and then later on they became a very powerful little nation. For this area is very small, but it became very powerful because they had a unique way of training their soldiers. So in the medieval times, the Swiss were very famous mercenaries. Okay, so mercenaries are people, guns for hire, right? But they had no guns, but they had other weapons back then that day. But later on, they had also guns. So the Swiss were very important in the decision between warring parts of Europe, because Europe always had wars, non-stop killing each other. Why? Because they had nothing better to do. Everyone wanted to get a piece of the pie always, so that's how humans were, and probably will be. And so yeah, the Swiss were in between all these nations, and they were like, okay, we can fight for anyone, just give us money. So that was the basis of their kind of unity. And so different time of the history going through, it's growing into one of the strongest mini states, and at one point also they are getting into a place where they have to decide whether they want to fight or not, because they have been defeated one time in a battle between the Habsburgs, and with the help of the Venetians they were defeated. That was in the 17th century. Later in the 18th century, they started thinking, okay, maybe we have to do something else. And so slowly they become upon the agreement that, okay, we're not going to take part in any of these wars, which came later on in from the 1847. Since 1847, they do not take part in any of these conflicts anymore. Okay, so very peaceful. So they started having this tradition of not doing anything, just focusing on other things. And of course they developed into a proper modern state in Europe. But also I think what is very important to understand here is that each region had its own people still. So in this country you have 4 different group of people coming together. Okay, so at least 3 now that we can still find alive. But back in the day, you had different regions joining together from the Swiss Alps region. So you had people who speak French because they were closer to the French-speaking part. And then you have people who speak Italian down in the southern parts of Switzerland. And then you had also German speaking. So all these influence from all around, then you can understand it makes sense, right? So you have all these language groups around. And there was another one which is a leftover from the Roman times. They call it the Romansch, so which is the Romani. It's the old language they used in the time of Romans. So it's still considered to be like an official language on paper, but now today we're going into the central north part of the Swiss plateau. The Swiss plateau is the most populated. That's where you have the largest cities like Zurich and Lucerne. Okay, and also you have the city of Bern, B-E-R-N, Bern, so not with the U, it's called Bern. It's one of the major cities, okay, and so that is also called the capital of Switzerland, but as I said earlier, they do not have that. Alright, so they don't have a real capital, they have their own regions. Okay, so regarding that also, it's very important, they have a unique set of laws and way of making laws. So in normal ways you have like, let's say, a democracy, right, or a republic or federal republic or whatever you want to call it, depending on which country you go. Here they have a very unique system. So they do not have a prime minister. It's more like they have a council, and for each year in this council is a small group of people who are elected, and then each year they swap the role. Okay, so there is no way to be corrupt. So because you have only 1 year, so you work only 1 year and you corrupt, nobody wants to see you anymore, right? So it's a small country. So they have this system, they call it the federal voting system, which also includes mostly in their decision making the citizens. So they always have referendums. They have many of them. So they always ask the people, okay, what do you want? Because if you don't ask the people what they want, you are not actually running a democracy, right? So you can say, oh yeah, you had election, but if you think about it, if you go into the store, you have 500 different cheese, right? But if you go to vote, you have 1 or 2 parties. So how you think you have a choice, right? So here they have a bit better system, which is a little bit more clever. So they can vote what they want. So if there is something being proposed about the change or a new law, even a region can veto it. So you can say, okay, we don't want that, and the rest of the people want it, then maybe they can pass it through, but they can say, oh, we don't want it. So they always have a say in these matters, which makes it pretty much more successful nation than other places. It's one of the reasons why we're on the top of the food chain when it comes to being rich. So the annual GDP per capita is about $80,000, which is quite a good average, right? So normally that's pretty high average, one of the top averages in the world. And yeah, so the cost of living is pretty high as well, but the standards of living are quite high as well. As we will see, the infrastructure and the way how things work, they're just amazing. Yeah, so this is the main thing about Switzerland. Also regarding how they are so rich, well, this has something to do with banking. Okay, so some people say they are evil and greedy. Maybe that's true, because all bankers are, right? But the reality is the Second World War. The Second World War was one of the reasons why the Swiss got filthy rich, because their banks and their policies. Okay, so in the time of the Second World War, all of Europe and all the world was hating Germans, right? But the Swiss said, okay, well, we don't like what you're doing, but we still want to make money. So they don't care. So they said, okay, we don't take part in this party, but we will, we're just gonna send you whatever you need, and then we make money. So they also opened their banks for the Germans to put all the stolen gold from the Jews and the rest of the people into the Swiss banks. And then, okay, that doesn't make you rich yet because it's not yours. But what happened was, after the Second World War, a lot of people died, right? Especially the Jews. So Jews got stolen, then they were dead. So, well, no, you cannot claim the gold if you're dead, right? So that was a smart move from the Swiss. Okay, they had actually paid some reparations for the Jewish, state, couple billion, I think Swiss franc. They paid them. so they can feel less guilty about stealing that man's loot. Yeah, but yeah, so that's one of the reasons. But also because of their laws regarding banking. So basically, they say, oh, we have secrecy. But the thing is, like, they are money laundering for sure for anyone. But you have to be rich enough to get in. You cannot just go there and say, okay, I don't want to pay tax at home and open a bank here. It's very strict. But also, if you have a couple million dollars, euros, they will say, of course we can open it, and they will help you to launder it very fast. So because they don't want to change that law, of course they have been facing some problems because of that. But to be honest, in the world, you know, the law is, if you have money, you have power. If you have power, you make the law, and you're above it. And so that's why it doesn't really change that much. They just said there was a couple of cases where they found out some illegal activities going on in these institutions. But to be honest, people were like, oh yeah, now they're gonna do something about it, but they didn't, and they're still happy. So, and nobody's gonna do anything about it, to be honest. And so they keep doing what they want because they're just the Swiss, right? And you can't argue with that. Also, so banking is one of the things, like the Credit Suisse. They're one of the top banks of the world, and if you run the bank, you run the world, right? And so, yeah, so this is one of the reasons why this country also have high standard of living, and well, they have their own free education and so on. So it's a very good place to grow up. And mostly they're focusing on the research and development sector, R&D, right? So for them, research and development in technologies is one of the main things that they invest in, because that's the future, right? So even in their schools, they have very high level of education, and so that's why they're becoming. They don't produce as much as a big country, but they also produce enough cheese and chocolate that they export, right, for people to buy outside of Switzerland. So one of those things. And then of course you have the Swiss watches. That's one of the most interesting and most well-known staples of the Swiss economy. Okay, so if you look at the watch, it has the precision, right? So, and the quality materials. So it also have to have the label, the Swiss made. Swiss made means it's gonna last you for long, okay? Especially with higher quality watches, like, you know, Rolex and Patek Philippe and all these, you know, yeah, you can buy a house for it, right? But some people, you know, it's kind of like a luxury, but they also produce watches that people can actually afford, like everyday people, you know, like Swatch, and not just that, but actually there are some lower price but very good quality watches that you can find, like in Rado and other brands. But basically, if you buy something of value, then it's gonna be a watch, because after 10 years that watch will still work, and they also give you guarantee on it, and if there is something problem with it, you can go and you know, get it fixed. And so that's one of the reasons why people like to buy the Swiss watches. And also they are the pioneers in making watches. You know, especially they made the first pocket watch. They made the first wristwatch. They made the first water resistant watch. So everything, almost the first of the first, they did it. Nowadays, since you have new technologies, they've been more specializing on the crafted handmade materials in it. So like a mechanical clock is more valuable than the one which is electric, right? So if you have a movement in it, self-winding, for example, then it worth a lot more. Okay, so soon we are passing by the airport of Basel. Okay, this area is the Basel airport. It's very interesting. It's probably one of the only in the world where you have exit to different countries, right? If you come out, you can go to France, can go to Germany, or you can go to Switzerland from different exits, right? So it's in a good location. Yeah. So Basel Airport, and then after that area, we're going to stop right at the border, which is going to be just in a few minutes. Yeah. So when we reach the border, I would like to ask everyone just to remain seated and do not take photos, please, because this is something about their own privacy of the the people who work here as policemen, because they are doing the control work on the security of the border. After we passed, you can take photos as much as you want. Okay, so this is not a toilet break, it's just a quick stop, so we get fixed for the papers, and then we are allowed to enter into the city of Basel. Okay, so after this crossing, there will be Basel, which is right on the border of Switzerland and France.
Okay guys, yun ang intro ng natin, ng tour guide natin na French. So narinig nyo na gaano yung government system ng Switzerland. Kaya super rich talaga sila. Kahit maliit na bansa lang sila, pero one of the richest, dahil iba talaga sila. Most consultative sila sa tao. So yun, papasok na kami sa border. So patayin ko na muna. So thank you for watching.